Great. So our talk now is by Chris Corriere here. He tweets at CA Corriere on Twitter. He works for AutoTrader.com and writes at Devops.com, and he is going to be speaking to you about DevOps for the masses. Right?
That's correct.
Would you prefer? You've got to look off. Great. All right, everyone. Chris, here you go.
Is this thing on?
It is on.
Okay. So, I liked John's talk this morning, wherever John's at. The whole staying in your safety zone and then getting into the spot where you're learning and then proceeding out to the danger zone. I think I might be on that line here between learning and danger zone. Real thin line between bravery and stupidity, right? I'm not afraid to look stupid as a DevOps engineer. So I am here for selfish reasons today. I've got 2 little kids and we homeschool them, and the best bet for them in the future, in my opinion, is learn how to get into tech. It's a good plan B, right? Go be a rock star, go be a movie star, do what you do. But if you're coding Python in the meantime, I'll sleep better at night. So I needed, the research part I talked about yesterday, that's really important. So I've been doing cookie ops with them where they wanted to do a bake sale. Who did a bake sale or a lemonade stand as a kid? And a few people. So you go out there, you sit in the heat. It's kind of terrible, you don't make any money, and the lesson you learn is I should have stayed inside and played Xbox or something instead. So I didn't want them to have that experience, so I've gotten into this habit. Some conferences I put out a survey, I ask questions so I can do research. I'm a big data nerd, I like data. And me and the kids bake cookies and mail them to people if they answer our survey and leave us an address and a cookie. So we've shipped like over 100 cookies to 4 different countries and a bunch of different states. We've had pretty good success with it. So I went to UltraConf in Atlanta this year, which is about diversity and inclusion. And I wanted to put a survey out there, and it's like, how do I do this and not die, right? Loaded questions. So what I did is I went through these, which, let's see, groups or communities you identify with. Are you comfortable with sharing your opinion about those groups with others? And then I got into cookie questions. We ship you the cookies you want, or at least we try. So who am I comfortable representing? I'm comfortable representing DevOps folks. I'm really passionate about this stuff. I consider it a privilege to be up here. Thing I can't remove from myself is I'm a cis white male. I learned what cis meant at UltraConf. Who knows what cis means? That's pretty good. So that means my gender identity and my sexual preferences align together. But I learned stuff, right? Is that right? Did I get that right?
Almost. It means that your gender identity, how you feel, matches the biology that you were born with.
Matches the biology I was born with. See, this is that danger zone thing. So we all have male and female energy in us. Like, you have chemistry in your body, both places. So I'm not talking about that anymore because it's dangerous. What I decided to do instead is, sorry, I got screen problems, but once I get back over here. 2 seconds, sorry. Can't see my mouse.
There it is. All right.
Yay. And we're good. So, DevOps for the masses. Instead of talking about people, I decided to talk about not people. So, I met Andrew Schaefer at Velocity last year, I think. And I'm a big game theory nerd, and he's into some game theory stuff. I'm also more of an extrovert than a lot of people in this community have come to find out, and I completely geeked out and was like, whoa, Grundy Sprout game theory, that's awesome, I love it. And
It's kind of terrible.
what ended up happening is he said, this is a talk from him I watched a few times, you should check it out if you haven't seen it. He talks about Nash Equilibrium, he talks about Pareto efficiency. So I'm jumping into the Nash Equilibrium stuff today because I did go re-examine it. So the thing I've come to realize is a tautology and a contradiction are only a little bit different. And if you look at the bottom there, I got a couple of truth tables. That's like an or and an and you've got one always true, one always false. But if we invert the logic, it's a bit off, like literally a bit off. They're constant, they're homogeneous at both ends, right? So there's a Nash equilibrium there where how do we get from all false to all true? You know, we always talk about the ideal situation of everybody getting along. But if you look at the prisoner's dilemma, which is a classic example of this problem, it's kind of a rock and a hard place. It's, do you want to go to jail for 1 year? Do you want to go to jail for 3 years? Or do you want to throw your buddy under the bus and get away clean? Which I don't like those options. Those are terrible options. There's not really a good mutual win for us, is there? So I don't think the point of the Nash equilibrium was to encourage us to, what's the word they put? Defect. So why risk changing your strategy here is pretty much the argument. No honor among thieves. I'm going to assume you're going to throw me under the bus even if we agreed that we're not going to snitch each other out, right? Like, yeah, sure, right. So, Deming to DevOps, this is another talk John gave. You should watch this one too if you haven't. I've watched this a few times. John talks about Darwin a little bit in this. I'm big into nature. I like the outdoors. So I tend to be more of a Darwinist, and I try to look at nature as an assembly line. So take what Deming did and stuff after that and kind of flip it around and look at nature through kind of that lens. So diversity ends up helping everywhere. This is one of those loaded words like integrity, that you can have artistic integrity, you can have financial integrity, personal integrity. Depending on the context, it means very different things. Diversity is the same way. You want to diversify your investments. You mitigate risk that way, right? You want to diversify what you eat. Who's heard eat all the colors of the rainbow? If you get sick and you're like, I'm carnivore, I eat meat all the time, it's probably why you don't feel so hot. Like, try to eat more vegetables, try to eat different colors. It's a real easy rule to improve your health. So that's a very colorful basket. There's not a ton of stuff in there, but that's probably a pretty healthy meal can come out of that, I think. So here's where those sort of collided. You got the Tulip bubble that happened in Amsterdam a really long time ago, where a single bulb was worth more than a house for a while, and it peaked and it crashed. That is effectively a monoculture from their financial industry, right? There was no diversification, and when that bubble popped, it was kind of a ghost town for a while. Things got bad. So here's where I've got better opportunities through diversification. So instead of bad and worse, we've got a neutral case here, and we've got a good stuff can happen. I like it when good things happen, so we really want it. I've got like a light green there for kind of good, and then like the darker green is really good. So we're gonna go through and fill out this table. So again, nature abhors monoculture. This is what happened with the Irish potato famine. They had one kind of potato that grew really well. It wasn't a lot of work. They were able to clone it. This blight came along that targeted that potato and wiped them all out. Other cultures where potatoes are common, there are some in South America, they grow a lot of different colors of potatoes. Not only does this give you better, more well-rounded nutrition, but if a nasty bug comes along that wants to attack all your crops, not everything dies. So maybe you got this other potato that isn't the easiest to maintain and grow, but if something wipes out all your other crops, you're going to be glad you had some of that planted because you still have something to eat. Mitigate risk through diversification. So competition is the bad case in nature. Anytime we compete, both people get hurt some. It creates a certain degree of adversity. You've got the survival of the fittest idea, but nature takes a very diversified view of that. It's not looking for the single best thing. It likes to keep more than one horse in the race. Because if you only got the one best horse and it trips and falls into a pit or something, nothing survives. Nature wants something to survive, as do I. So we compete for food, habitat, a chance to procreate as a strong thing in the animal kingdom. You see this a lot. So if you find yourself in a competitive situation, try not to be a butthead about it, really. I've learned to deflect better and absorb better and listen, even when people come at me strong and are loud, using foul language, whatever. It's like they're upset about something. There's probably a way we can cooperate, but I gotta get creative about this. So if your budding heads try to adapt, this is a pitcher plant, right? So you've got, in places that have very strong ecological diversity, the nutrients in the soil and the sunlight from above can't sustain all of it. So instead of dying, this plant adapted to trap insects and eat them, right? So it changed what it was doing and moved into some form of specialization. I've done this in a few jobs where it's like, hey, there's all this stuff I know, I can help you all out with it. And that's kind of my thing that I was doing, and I'm kind of defensive about it. And you can kind of roll off of it and find a gap that's not filled, a group that is more cooperative. There's an opportunity somewhere if you're jiggling all the doorknobs. So there's a lot of competition in particularly ecological diverse places, even among pitcher plants. So this one's a little different than the others. Keep adapting until you find a safe game state. So let's see here. Yeah, this one has adapted to turn into a shoe toilet. So what's going on here, he quit trying to catch bugs. That leaf that's in front, those usually have a scent on them to attract the bugs in. This particular pitcher plant instead started to develop like a sweet nectar on it. So that shrew comes along, stands on this pitcher plant, just goes to town on that nectar leaf, eating all the juice off. And like most rodents, it kind of poops all the time. And plants are nitrogen based. I know that's kind of gross. But this is how this plant learned to adapt and survive, is it found a home, it found someone it could cooperate with in an environment that was sustainable. There's even competition among these types of pitcher plants. So this one turned into something that can house a bat. So the bats go in there during the day and sleep, and it's kind of the same drill. It collects everything the bat drops, and that's what it sustains off of, and the bat has a nice cozy place to hang out in the middle of the jungle during the day. So we adapt out of competition into what exactly? So Mentalism is something's mentalistic. I think I'm saying that right? Does anybody knows another way to say that? No? I think that's right. Thank you. I'm not a biology expert. This is relatively new stuff to me too. So live in the moment. You may not realize you're squashing anyone. So I was kind of jittery yesterday. I dropped a couple guys. That's a good example of that. Some people take very strong offense. It is excluding a lot of the room. It's not intentional. It's something I'm working on still. So I apologize if that offended anybody. But you got to be aware of your surroundings. You have to know what's going on and who you're talking to and who's around you. You don't want to squash anyone on accident. And this can happen to guys too. Guys are more sensitive than they're given credit for. The slightest of inconsiderations hit them harder than you would think. John talking about getting the finger in car and traffic in the morning is kind of a good example of that, where we tend to overreact sometimes. I guess it'd be a simplistic explanation of it. So if we go from bad to neutral, and then we go from bad to good, something that's trying to operate in a beneficial fashion, but you don't have completely good actors in the system, there's an opportunity for it to become parasitic, right? So we do move in and out of these spaces too. And this is a good example of that these aren't static game states, they change and actors move in and out of them. So hornworm moths are buttheads. That's a tobacco plant, and they open up at night and the moths pollinate them. And this is what the plant does outside of feeding them. You can ask any tobacco plant about this, it'll like hormone moss. They go and lay eggs, and the caterpillars hatch and they feed off the leaves, which for the most part is okay, but sometimes they get greedy. And that cooperation becomes parasitic at that point. So we've been talking, like, I hadn't heard law 2 feet before today. That's one of the things I've gotten out of this conference, which I agree with. I've heard a lot of people in the community say, well, I can't just up and leave. I'm planted in the ground, right? I can't move. What happens if I'm being fed off of parasitically and I'm stuck there? What do? You can still adapt. So what the tobacco plant will do is it'll start blooming during the day instead if it starts getting overcome with these little worms, and it attracts hummingbirds instead of moths. So again, you gotta be creative, you gotta look for opportunity. The plants are figuring this out there, right? They've been around longer than us, it's not a surprise. So even if you can't move, you can change, be creative. So our light green squares are gonna come into commensalism. I'm pretty sure that translates as being at the same table. So if you think of 2 animals at the same watering hole, a gazelle and a zebra, they're not bothering each other, they're not helping each other, it's kind of arbitrary that they're both there. This isn't our ideal game state yet, but this is the first one I like. We're not competitive, we're not squashing anybody, we're not feeding off anybody, we're peaceably coexisting. So that's sort of bare minimum situation you should be trying to find, you know. And with the diversity respect, you're moving into this thing where you want to celebrate other people. Sometimes they're not particularly comfortable as a representative of their culture. So there's room to move in and out of these, and you have to be apologetic if you do step on someone's toes. Being the extrovert, I've gotten better at the nonverbal cues and knowing when I freak somebody out that is a really big introvert, and I'm quick to apologize for that and give them space when I realize I do it. Again, something I'm working on. So if you're trying to get commensal and you think you might be a predator, invite someone to the table and give them something to eat. These little fish that swim around with the shark, not bothering anybody. He doesn't really care about them. I'm kind of an optimist, so I'd like to think that sometimes the shark kills something and says, go ahead guys, chow down. Go ahead y'all, chow down. See, caught it there. So try this. I do this a lot. Even with newer technologists on the team, new hires, reach out to them, try to see if there's something you can learn from them. What do they have a lot of experience with? Is there anything you know you can help them with? And back to the just listen. Sometimes just let them talk. Try to bring them in and keep them inclusive. Give them something to feed off of that's of no harm to you. Be a polite dinner guest too. Sometimes I brought people in like this and they go kind of buck wild and it's like, oh man, this is gonna be harder than I thought. So I take that in stride. It will happen on occasion, but be aware of both sides of that if someone's trying to extend an invitation, you don't want to overstep that invite, right? So our ideal state is where we're symbiotic, right? This is my favorite one, where we're both benefiting from our relationship. We're not just coexisting, but there's a direct gain from us cooperating together. And this is, in my opinion, ideal state of a Nash Equilibrium. This is where we've got a tautology, it's in the positive, and there's nothing to be gained from changing our gain state at that point, right? So, pitcher plants pollinate too. It looks like that bug is getting eaten, right? This is my favorite one. This one really blew my mind. So it's technically an orchid. Has anybody looked into the diversity of orchids and all the cool stuff orchids do, try to procreate? There's a lot of good stuff out there. This is my favorite example. So this is an assembly line where it's not eating that bee. This is an orchid bee that he's getting in there to get the scent on him to attract female orchid bees. That's what attracts him to the plant. But the plant gives him one way out. And when he gets through that gap, he gets stuck into a quality assurance gap, right? So it's gonna hold on to this bee until it glues these 2 little pollen nodules onto its back. And this is its one chance to get itself out into the world again. So it'll hold it there for like an hour before it loosens its grip and finally lets it go. And you can see him kind of crawling out there, and that's him flying away with the payload, right? So this is where it had an opportunity to kill and eat that bug, and it decided not to. Decided, how can we work together and cooperate, which I think is brilliant. I've been outsmarted by a plant again. So the last thing I want to talk about was fortitude and perseverance. There's actually 2 pepper moths on here. I think he's like right there. I think that's a pepper moth. Maybe I'm seeing things, I don't know. But he's well camouflaged. And what happened during the Industrial Revolution, all these white trees got covered in ash and turned black. Mice do this too. So there's variation in color with them. They're in a position where they change or die, right? That's a Deming thing, that's a Darwin thing. So when those trees got covered in ash, all of a sudden the white moss stuck out and the black moss were well camouflaged. Completely flipped the script on them. So if you can't adapt and stay strong, the role you're to play in this world may not yet be clear, which I know is a big ask, but you never know how things are going to work out. You might be that one potato that saves everybody from a famine, right? So stay strong. I'm here to help if I can. If you need someone to talk to, if there's something specific I can do for you, please reach out to me. I'm Chris Corriere. Thanks, y'all. We out of time, or one question? Anybody? Yeah?
Because you mentioned your kids at the beginning, I'm interested in knowing what they thought of all of the moths and bugs and plants that eat bugs and everything else.
Oh, they'd much rather play with this all day than do any programming, I can tell you that. So that goes back to that fortitude and perseverance thing. It's like, we'll get to fun animal stuff. We go to the zoo day at the Atlanta Zoo a lot. We got a membership there. They have a zoo school thing. So we do a lot of fun animal stuff too. I don't chain them down and make them program all the time, but I do try to encourage it as much as I possibly can.
Sounds like you're giving them good STEM direction anyway then.
I try. Any other questions, comments? Well, and by all means, I'll be around for the rest of the day and a bit tomorrow too. So sync up with me if you got something more personal, and I appreciate you being so attentive. Thank you very much.